Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Damme and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies. And today I want to tell you about some really hard to find horror flicks you can currently catch on Prime Video. So, longtime viewers, you are familiar with my hidden gem list. This is almost one, but it does include some fairly well-known horror movies that for whatever reason just do not rise to the top on Prime Video right now. And this list is excluding some really great movies like Midsommar and Hereditary, Cabin in the Woods, and some other great horror movies that just do rise to the top. That's the only reason they don't make this list. But this list does start all the way back at number 20 with a fairly unknown movie called Borderland. Now this is a very, very low budget movie, but I think it will appeal to fans of the movie Hostel. For lack of a better word, torture porn fans will like this. But it's about a group of college kids that go to a Mexican border town and they inadvertently cross paths with a sacrifice cult. Very Texas Chainsaw Massacre in terms of what plays out. Ultimately could have been a lot better, but fans that really dig that genre, that not just slasher, but just like really brutal, horrific, like, and also realistic situation just in terms of nothing supernatural going on. If you're a fan of that, you should definitely check out this movie, but do keep in mind it's all the way back at number 20. Now my next pick is another low budget flick, and it's slower and certainly the least frightening one on this list, but still a good entry into the zombie genre with The Returned. This is about an outbreak, and really it's different in a lot of ways because it takes the perspective of a victim, someone who is becoming a zombie. And yes, I've seen that before, but it's always done in a comical way because it is kind of a funny scenario. This is done more serious where a guy's trying to figure out how to restrain himself, things like that. And it's dark and it's grim, but not overly so. I think a wider audience could enjoy this. If you're tired of zombie movies, I don't know that this is the one to win you back, but if it's been a while since you've seen one that just felt a little different, this one's got several years on it at this point, but still a good watch if you've never seen it. And I promise I'm not budget hating, I just like to point out the fault of some of these movies is the fact that they suffered from very, very low budgets. However, there are some low budget movies way high up on this list that are absolutely fantastic. But my next pick is actually written and directed by Bobcat Goldthwait, who most of you probably know from the Police Academy movies.
I'd now like to discuss with you something that'll be vital for you to know when you're like out there on the job as a police officer. And that's the correct way on how to eat a donut.
But he is a huge Bigfoot fan, and he did this horror movie about people looking for Bigfoot. Now this one, because of the low budget, and I mean like micro budget, there's not a lot of special effects, it's very slow paced, it has a Blair Witch Project kind of a feel, but there are some good sequences in this one. If you're patient and you do like watching found footage, low budget movies, this is a great little gem. If you're tired of those things, Willow Creek is not going to be the one that you're going to want to pick off of this list, but for those of you that like what I'm talking about, I think you're going to be surprised at how well this one works. Alright, my next pick is a good example of why these are not hidden gems. The Lazarus Effect came out in theaters, it was a wide release, sort of the PG-13 horror movie that all the teenagers go to see on Friday night. And honestly, I can kind of see why it didn't do well, but at the same time, I feel like it's fairly underappreciated. Now, I saw some things coming, stuff like that, but I still found it entertaining. I thought the cast was great. It features people like Olivia Wilde, Mark Duplass, Donald Glover, and Evan Peters. So pretty interesting cast for a sort of sci-fi horror movie, but it does revolve around a group of scientists who are working on this new formula that can bring things back from the dead, at least after like a short period, and obviously things don't go well. It's not over the top, but it went further with sort of the craziness than I expected it to, and I appreciated that aspect of it. I liked that. It was a surprise to me. So considering I had no expectations for this movie because it sort of didn't get good reviews, I ultimately really liked it and I do recommend it. Now, Let Us Pray is another very, very dark one. This one mostly takes place in a prison. It's got kind of an Assault on Precinct 13 thing going on, and it is dark with a capital D. Now, this is another one that lets you know the better, but just keep in mind, this one's bloody, it's grim, it's dark, visually it's pretty disturbing, but it's got some great performances in it from some people that you have seen from shows like Game of Thrones and The Walking Dead, so good strong performances and then just this really hard edge to it. It's one of the more grim ones I have on this list, so just be prepared for that. It and Borderlands are really up there in terms of how kind of intense and brutal they can be. And then I wouldn't say my next pick is intense and brutal, but this is the one that the fewest of you should watch. It's a cult classic called Society that is basically not a good movie. It's a B movie, but it's been sort of like treasured and remastered and revisited, and it's got a cult following for a reason because it's pretty wild. Now, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it works somehow. I'm not exactly certain how that occurs because I've seen it more than once, and it's so weird, and ultimately it's incredibly disturbing, and if I were to tell you what happens, it would ruin it, so I won't do that. But the disturbing nature of it is highly sexual, so if that interests you, watch Society with the understanding that it's this kind of crazy, wild, midnight B-movie thing, and if that doesn't interest you, let's just move on with the rest of the list. Thinner is based on a Stephen King book, and it was, I believe, made for TV, maybe even HBO originally, or one of those channels, and it's pretty good. It's about a guy who gets a curse from a gypsy where he just continues to lose weight, and this predates like The Machinist with Christian Bale. It's makeup effects and stuff that do it. It's nothing, you know, crazy where the actor lost a ton of weight, but it's still kind of fun to see that, and it is dark, and I love me a good gypsy curse. Drag Me to Hell being another personal favorite of mine, so the gypsy curse thing is just kind of a cool effect. As a made-for-TV movie, it's surprisingly good, and all that means is if it came out in the theater, you'd probably be disappointed, but if you caught it on TV, you'd be surprised. Now, my next pick, all major horror fans know about this movie, and almost anybody who's not a major horror fan probably missed it. If you're the exception to the rule, good for you, but The House of the Devil is a very classic style horror movie about a babysitter who goes to the wrong house and horrible things happen. It takes place, I believe, either in the 70s or early 80s, and it feels like it. It feels like a movie from that era, even though it's only about 10 years old, and it's spooky. It's got a great sense of dread and ultimately works really well as a horror movie. Like, it is a, like I said, a horror lover's movie, but it is slow. It's not necessarily a problem, but something that I should point out before you watch it. You get pretty far into the movie before anything really starts happening. Luckily, it all works together really well, and it's worth the wait. It's only about a 90-minute movie, so you don't have to wait that long, but the build-up leads up to something, and it does work really well.
This thing has no head, honey.
I know, sir.
Most bodies have a head.
Absolutely.
Where's this thing's head?
Not sure yet, sir.
Oh, we can find his head.
Good idea, sir.
Some Guy Who Kills People is a dark comedy starring Kevin Corrigan, and this feels a lot like Dexter. He's a guy, literally just a guy who kills people. It's a very, very appropriate title for this movie, but it's got some fun performances, it's got some tension and some stuff that's kind of fun. Not a jump out of your seat, scare you, look under the bed type of a horror movie, but for horror fans that want to see some blood and some guts and some funny situations, Some Guy Who Kills People is a really great pick. And then we finish off the bottom 10 on this list with Frozen. This is by Adam Green, who does a lot of cult classic horror movies. And this one is about a couple of people stuck on a ski lift. It stops, they're the last ones on the mountain, and they are stuck there for possibly way too long to survive, and so they start kind of having to struggle and figure out what to do and how to escape. So it's a scary situation. It's got kind of a life raft type of a thing to it. It's a survival horror movie. It delivers on the concept well. It doesn't do anything overly weird or crazy, but you find yourself entertained at just two people stuck on basically a park bench, a suspended park bench for 90 minutes. It's surprisingly entertaining considering that's all that it is, and trust me, that's all that it is, but for a good, like, high tension kind of a horror flick, it's pretty good. It just barely edges into that horror genre though. If you like this type of content and you want to stay informed, I do videos like this every week, so be sure you click that little subscribe button and the bell icon so you get notified when new videos like this one come up, or my list for Amazon and other streaming services. Alright, the top 10 on this list starts off with Hole in the Ground. This is a fairly recent release. You've probably seen it. It got teased out kind of when it was released, and then it has just sort of like disappeared because I don't think a lot of people watched it. It's well worth watching. Another one with a very slow pace to it. It's worth it. You're not headed nowhere. You're headed somewhere. You just headed there fairly slowly, but I liked it. It takes place in Ireland, I believe, and you're just out of this remote house out in the woods, a mother and a child. There's a giant hole out in the woods, like a huge hole in the ground, and weird stuff starts happening. That's all you need to know. Everything builds off of that, and it is creepy. This is a very, very creepy movie. The story's very interesting. There's a lot of moving parts, but they all work together pretty well. I'll say I enjoyed it a lot more than I expected to, given the setup. I was kind of surprised where this one went, and I think you will be too. Resolution is another one that I know die-hard horror fans have seen. This is done by the same writer-director team who did The Endless, which has been on Netflix for a little over a year. I know a lot of you dig that movie. Resolution is the same creators. It's a lower budget film. You need to watch it. If you like The Endless, I'm not even gonna talk anymore about Resolution. You need to watch Resolution. If you didn't like The Endless, there's a good chance you're probably not gonna like Resolution. So rather than try to give away anything on this one, I'm gonna leave it at that. If you haven't seen The Endless, maybe check that one out first. I know some of you will disagree with that. It's the better, kind of bigger movie, and I think the better recommendation for someone that's not seen anything from these guys. You can go check it out on Netflix at the time of me posting this video. So if you like House of the Devil, you need to watch Starry Eyes. I think you'll enjoy it even more. I know I did. This one's about an actress who's struggling. She's trying to sort of get her big break, and you spend a lot of the movie with her. So you do, like some of the others, have to be patient for this one. But again, payoff is fantastic. I can't even use a figure of speech without giving it away. I just don't want to say anything more, but again, very grim, and not just in terms of what you see on camera, but just dark subject matter. She's very objectified as she's like going through auditions and stuff, and she's really having to like struggle with her own morality and everything, and then you just get this cool payoff that you can only get in a low budget horror movie like this. I really dug everything about this one. It's just one of those things that's a little off the beaten path, which is why it's such a good fit for this list. Okay, so Leviathan came out and was supposed to be sort of, I don't want to say a competitor to Alien, but was supposed to capitalize on the success of movies like Alien and The Abyss. This one takes place in an underwater facility. You get some great sequences just out of that, very much like The Abyss. In fact, I would relate this one a lot to The Abyss. If you love The Abyss, you need to watch Leviathan. It is not as pitch perfect as The Abyss. Like, you know, James Cameron is one of the like best at what he does in terms of that type of a movie. He kills it. This is not nearly as well put together, but it's still good. It's still a very, very strong recommendation. Just don't expect to come away with like your new favorite movie or anything, but I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by all the crazy stuff that goes on in this. I think it's a great mixture of The Abyss and Alien. It just happens to not really be as good as either. However, those are both fantastic, like top shelf movies. This one's just on the shelf lower. There's nothing wrong with it. It's the Captain Morgan of underwater alien movies. Okay, one of the weirder ones on this list that I just really love, it's another surprise from recent years, it's BRAID. This one is a first-time director, it's an all-female cast, and it is dark. This one's kind of like a female-led psychedelic version of Clockwork Orange. Now, in no way that I feel like it ripped things off, but you can see influences all over the place. Kubrick stuff, this one gave me the creeps. It messed with my head in a really interesting way. Longtime viewers hear me say this a lot. I'm like, is this nonsense or is there something here? And by the time it was over, I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I totally get what they were trying to say with this one. I really dug it. One that is just dark. It's off-putting at times, but really well put together. Good performances from all the leads. And I love this recommendation because I think it's one that a lot of horror fans, like die-hard horror fans, have yet to discover. If that's you, put this one on your short watch list. Watch it soon. Okay, top 5. This is where we start getting into ones some of you guys have seen with Bone Tomahawk. Now, this is one I know a lot of you have watched because I see it in the comments. I don't want to say more than any other movie, but it's up there. It's like top 3 in terms of how often it's cited in the comments section. But this is a Western led by Kurt Russell and another just really great cast. And another one that takes a while to get where it's going, but once it gets there, whoo, you better hold on. It's not one that's brutal like throughout the whole movie, but when it decides to be brutal, it is a rough, and I mean rough. Make sure you didn't just recently eat or anything like that before you watch, at least watch the end of this movie, but I totally dig it. It's from the same director as Dragged Across Concrete and Brawl in Cell Block 99, and with this one you just get this Western vibe that's absolutely fantastic, and it's another one that I know horror fans absolutely love. If you're getting into some of these recommendations, this is a top shelf one off of this list. Now, similar to Bone Tomahawk, Stakeland is not one that's going to necessarily scare you. You're not going to be looking under the bed or checking the back seat of the car, but it's got a great horror vibe. It's post-apocalyptic, and instead of zombies, they're blood-sucking vampires, but they're very, very similarly related to zombies. In fact, they're basically zombies, except they feed on blood instead of like flesh and brains. There's some other differences, but all intents and purposes, you're watching like a post-apocalyptic zombie movie with a slant to it, and it's cool. It's a cool slant to it. I dug it. I thought it worked really well. Good performances. And another one with an incredibly low budget and all the money's on the screen. This movie looks way more expensive than it was, and not that a movie has to look expensive, but they just did such a good job bringing this one to life. There is a Stakeland 2 out there. It's not horrible, but it's nowhere near as good as the original Stakeland. I think you can watch this one and leave the other one on the shelf. My next two are classic movies in the genre that just don't rise to the top, and I know there are plenty of you out there that have never seen either, starting with The Dead Zone. This one stars Christopher Walken. It's one of my favorite Christopher Walken movies. And when I say Christopher Walken movies, I mean movies where he's the star. You know, there's plenty of great movies with Christopher Walken in them that I like more, but for him as the lead, this is one of my favorites and one of my favorite performances of him. There's even a really great classic SNL sketch based on his ability to like see the future. Now, this one went on to spawn a TV series that was pretty popular as well, and he plays a guy who comes to have the ability to see how someone's going to die, so he can essentially see the future. Very dark, moody stuff, but it does feel a little bit timeless. Yes, everything on screen is dated, the cars and the decor and everything, but the way that this was shot and the way it was put together, it does feel fairly consistent with the way movies are made today. It doesn't feel like you're watching an old movie. The reason I'm going on about that, if you don't typically watch older flicks, give this one a shot, because it is really, really well done, and there's a reason that it's kind of withheld the test of time, and that they made a show and did all this other stuff with this concept. Another one I should have mentioned, based on Stephen King's work. Now, Jacob's Ladder stars Tim Robbins and is a personal favorite of mine. It's incredibly dark. It's got some very, very dark visuals, but it's barely like a horror movie. It's more of this like psychological horror, this almost like a bad trip kind of a thing, and it works so well. Some of the effects, even though they're subtle, are super creepy. I mean, visually, this is one of the creepiest movies I've ever seen. They just released a remake last year. It's on Netflix. I have not heard good things, and it's one of those situations. I'm normally not like this, but I love the original so much, and I've heard nothing good about the new one. I think it's just a different movie with the same name. I don't care to see it and have it sort of sully the original. That's how much I love this movie. This one's going to surprise you. This is an art film, but it all works and is kind of a must watch. If you like a lot of my recommendations and you find that we have similar taste in movies, you need to watch Jacob's Ladder, but it is upsetting, so watch it when you're in the right mood for that. All right, big surprise, big reveal here. My number one pick is actually two movies. It's the original and the sequel for Grave Encounters. Now, some of you will be upset by that, but only because you feel like everybody knows about these movies. I promise you they do not. Major horror fans, I know you've seen them and probably love these movies. There are a lot of people probably watching this video that have never heard of them. I cannot recommend these movies enough. They're fun, they're funny, and they're not comedies. They work really well as horror movies. With this, you follow a group of ghost hunters, which is just a concept that I find really great from the start. They go into this abandoned hospital or an asylum. I believe it's an asylum, and then they're not able to leave. And then that's it. That's like first 15 minutes of the movie, not giving away anything else. It is fun. Yes, it has a found footage vibe, but it's a little more polished than found footage vibes would normally be. I think because they're like a TV production crew, so like their footage is better and it works. I think the sequel is almost as good as the original, meaning if you love the original, absolutely do not pass on the sequel. These movies are a ton of fun and a must watch again if you like most of my recommendations. But that is it for this list of 20. If you liked it, click the like button. If you got something to say, let me know in the comments. I want to thank all the Patreon supporters. Their support, it means a lot to me. I really appreciate it. It lets me know that you guys really enjoy the type of stuff that I'm putting together and that you see value in it. I have some more stuff. I keep saying it. I have some more stuff coming. I'm going to stop talking about it, but there's more stuff coming very, very soon. But I will keep making videos like this one as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this Prime Video episode, even if you don't have Prime Video, and you will see me on the next one.